But this is, or was, metal, and then a plastic liner, and then wood. So it's a wooden tank with a plastic liner and metal with that in there. It's pretty awesome, huh? Looks good. It's kind of like halfway outside, halfway inside his shop. All his stormwater was contained. He had because he's zinc, the stormwater made him actually collect every raindrop that falls on his property and go through a treatment system, which is unique. So I wasn't afraid it was going off site, but trying to figure out where it might fit into the scheme. So any questions you might ask if you saw a tank like that at a shop? Just throw some questions out there real quick. Trying to make you think here. I want you to learn to come up with your own answers out there. Yeah, great. How long has it been there? About what the heck is that? What, yeah, what do you use that for? Are you using that thing over there? So, what's in the tank? He says, well, acid residues, heavy metals. Use it for stripping metal parts. Is it hazardous? Yes. I know it's got zinc, and the zinc I used to get used to be 5% lead. Okay. Great. Hadn't used it since '94. Will it be used again? He's like, no, look at the condition of that thing. Think I'm crazy? Yeah, it's a waste. It was a waste a long time ago. So, again, we're going to work our magic here and go to RCRA Online, Advanced Search, 13790, I think. All right, so I stumbled across this. I was pretty sure I was on solid ground, making him do something with that, but, he said that, there's no way to fix that tank. I'm sure it's in a landfill. I mean, it was properly disposed through. Several cubic yard boxes. I didn't even think till after when he cut up all his wood if he was treating hazardous waste or not. I was just happy the thing was going away. So, again, what is the, thank you for your letter just up on the top, relating to final hazardous waste tank rules, and pretty much he's asking a question here, applicability of secondary containment to production tanks during periodic cleanouts, and it goes back to the same exclusion that we have already talked about, generating product raw material, unless the hazardous waste, so it's exempt, right? It's not a waste, unless the unit remains more than 90 days after it ceases to be operated for manufacturing or for storage or transportation. So, okay, I'm on solid ground. Get rid of that thing. All right.
Is there a line that you cross? I run across like spent sulfuric acid. They're changed the process. They're not going to use it. They just haven't had time to. Or not spent, but no longer. They're not going to use it.
Spent sulfuric acid is. That is a hard one. I've got spent sulfuric acid coming out from Ohio, and we're like actively kind of doing enforcement. I'm trying to figure out who's going to do what between DTSC and US EPA and me, but they have all this processing they have to do of it, and they're getting acids and solvents from off-site. And the acids, it turns out there are just a lot of exemptions for recycling of spent sulfuric acid because it is like the #1 transported hazardous material. So there's weird exclusions in the definition of waste and other areas for recycling. So spent materials, RCRA, under the EPA, they changed the definition of solid waste a couple of years ago, and I don't know if anyone's had to deal with it, but they were trying to encourage more recycling. So they changed the definition of solid waste, and things that used to say, no, you need a RCRA permit if you're going to reclaim, whether it's a byproduct or spent material sludge, whatever it is. They loosened it up. So for the last few years, like spent materials like sulfuric acid, you could do different types of reclamation and treatment. It falls out of the federal scheme, but it's still not falling out of our scheme. And to make it worse, the EPA has been bombarded, I guess, by some of the environmental groups and said, wait, some of this doesn't make sense. And so now they're rewriting that, and it's confusing on when is it a waste. But California hasn't changed their regulations or position or adopted any of that. So it should remain unchanged for us in California. If it's a spent material, it's going to be, and it's corrosive, it's going to get pulled into our regulatory authority. Yeah?
Do you have the authority for a tank like that travel that's in there to sample the ground?
Do we have the authority to sample the ground?
Like to see if there's been any need for corrective action, remediation?
That's a good question. It's, I think, going to depend on a number of things. If you can show that there's still an active release from your tank, you can make them clean up their release, right? I mean, they've got to clean up. Their spills are historical, though, in the soil, as far as I know. Everything I've dealt with, it's not, the point of generation is when you remove it, when you dig up that soil. Once you start excavating, you now have a point of generation, and you need to determine if it's hazardous. So, that being said, unless your jurisdiction has mandatory corrective action authority where you can mandate that, I don't think you're going to be able to make them go dig up their soil in all cases unless you can show there's been a release of hazardous waste. It's going to be hard. I have several I've had to refer to DTSC, their corrective action group. Anyone have anything different to say than that? Am I off? Okay. I can say anything I want. You guys are going to believe me? At some point, you're going to have to do an investigation. But that is not within my authority as CUPA inspector if it's not from something I'm currently regulating out there right now. So just because I can make them get rid of that tank, but I can't make them excavate their soil as far as I know. It could, now you've got several agencies, you've got possibly stormwater issues if it's on open soil, you've got, water board, regional or state, you've got, and even DTSC is does have corrective action authority. So I think if you can build a good enough case, they can send a letter and mandate you do some investigation, but that's not within my authority as the CUPA inspector. So, all right. So cruising along, there are a whole bunch of RCRA Online documents available, and I'm pretty sure I got that when I cheated. I'm not a salesperson, but this is like, for me, I have a Bible for hazardous waste. We had a training down in San Diego, and we were able to get some of the other Southern California technical leads to come down and join us, Terry and Nick, and so now we have these resources. McCoy's RCRA Unraveled. I'm sure there are other great books out there, but for me, it backs up, and it's like, why are they regulating this? Oh, that makes sense. And then how they kind of develop the regulations, and then it links you. So it takes you through like an instructional approach on different topics, such as tanks. There's a whole chapter on recycling. There's a whole chapter on tank issues. There's a whole chapter on point of generation in their resource there. So once you get within it and you start going through your topics, it lists all these references to RCRA Online. So that's where I got all those. All right, points of generation for hazardous waste. I'm a little behind here, so I'm going to start speeding up. So I've got electroplating process here, hot water rinse, and then a bucket that I think they use for chemical additions to the process tank. So tell me which of these, man, I'm sorry. Which one of these are a point of generation? So when they remove it as a waste, I mean, I think that's Pretty clear, right? Okay. Non-operational for greater than 90 days, we just covered that. This is the one that gets tough. When it's sent through an on-site recycling process. And everyone say D, all the above, because as far as I can tell, there's no way around that for any of those. All right. So process tanks and points of generation. So again, here's why it's important. Pretty much everything we're doing within our inspection is depending on the point of generation. That's where you do your waste determination and sampling. You determine the generator status and what tank and container requirements apply. Air standards are going to apply from the point of generation. Your treatment tier goes back to the point of generation, but then you also need to know what the waste is, the quantity, and the treatment processes. Yeah. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Why isn't CESQG there? Pretty much because other than for transporting small amounts of waste to a household facility or TSDF, silver waste, and California really doesn't recognize CESQG, but point of generation would also be important for CESQG. I guess I probably should add that there. It's a good question. All right. Sample analysis or knowledge of process. So now we got our point of generation. What is good enough to figure out, characterize your waste? It's simple sometimes. When it's not, the generator needs to make the determination. So, and this is important. They are the person whose act or process produces the waste, or whose act first causes hazardous waste to become subject to regulation. I've had situations with drums going around town that shouldn't have, and I ended up with 6 co-generators of the waste, all with liability, responsibility for the waste, contractually or otherwise not, because they were part of the process that contributed to it. So one of them said, "I'll take care of it," and I said, "You're my girl in the case." We took care of it. So yeah, you can have multiple. The point was you can have multiple generators. So this is the look I get from some of my businesses out in town. Like, what are you talking about? Of course, accountability is different than responsibility, but I like the owl. So it's not the inspector's responsibility. Of course, you're going to have to help them. But they got to make the call. And if they don't, then you'll do some sampling, right? Call whoever in to help sample. So hazardous waste determination. Sorry to do this to you in the advanced class because you've probably been beat up all week, but just want to point out it's got to be a waste. It's got to be hazardous. Make sure it's not excluded from classification as a waste or exempted from hazardous waste requirements or an excluded recyclable material. Whew. So we got a waste. They got to figure out if it's hazardous. So again, just to simplify, is it listed or is it a characteristic? So they can test it or apply knowledge of process in light of the materials used. This is called waste analysis. Want to show you real quick, since we've got the magical internet connection, a link to a document here for a whole bunch of questions on waste analysis at facilities that treat or generate, store hazardous waste. But this is a quote that I took out of there, and really, every time I have a problem trying to figure out, well, what tier are they, and are they a CE or CA, PBR? Is it even hazardous waste? I don't know. What are the points of generation? Every time I have a business that's just, I'm pulling my hair out, it comes down to this, is that they just haven't identified from the point of generation the waste that they generate. If they did that and had some information, acceptable knowledge or representative samples, once they have that, it's easy. you can figure out what requirements apply. So let's see if you can click on that. Is that it? Oh, you're good. All right, so let's scroll down a page here. This is the document. It's also within the RCRA Online compendium, but right here, stop. So part 1 talks about waste analysis responsibilities for your facility and how to meet the requirements. 2 is different guidance on waste analysis, making a waste analysis plan and sampling, laboratory testing. Part 3 is some good checklists for the facility, and then part 4 is sample waste analysis plans. So if you have a facility, again, when waste analysis plans, who knows when they're required for our facilities? Only one situation. Okay, yes, so I don't inspect TSDFs unless they have a little generator site at the TSDF, but I inspect permit by rules. And the PBR sites, yes, they have to also, like TSDFs, have the written waste analysis plan. Now, I have some facilities that generate tons and tons of waste, and they're conditionally authorized, and they've kind of developed some of their own waste analysis plans, and it works for them. So it's a good resource, all right? All right, I'm going to try and get through a few slides here for a break. All right, why would you use knowledge? Because sometimes you know what it is. You know it's listed, or you know it's super flammable. You know it's toxic. Knowledge of process is going to work fine. Don't forget ICRs, ignitable, corrosive, reactive, only regulated as long as they have that characteristic. Process knowledge, though, and this is from the document I just showed you. If you got a business that wants to claim process, say, okay, great, you know. Use your MSDSs, use what you know, maybe limited analyticals, maybe not analyticals at all. But somewhere it should include detailed information on the waste to make sure it's similar. Make sure that they have that written out. And they're going to need that for their transporter. I mean, any good transporter of hazardous waste is going to want to know what they're taking away. So at some point, it's got to get written down. Your generators might not have it available, but hopefully the hazardous waste hauler has at least gone through and profiled it properly. So knowledge of process might be appropriate, again, from the same document, where, again, it's listed waste, F or K, discarded unused materials on the P&U list, health and safety. Health and safety is a little too dangerous to actually go in and collect samples, or maybe it's a reactive waste and they don't want to try and sample. And then the physical nature of the waste is, you know, debris with heavy metals all over it. They might just presume it's hazardous because running an analytical test would be too difficult. They can always claim conservatively that it's hazardous using what they know based on process knowledge rather than incur the cost of testing. And I think we probably have that happen more often than not on a lot of waste because their hauler can take it away for the same price or less than it would be to go through a whole bunch of testing for a small generator. What is a limited analytical? It talks about in there. They didn't really conclusively determine it's hazardous, probably because they didn't take enough samples or for some reason they have a little bit of information that shows there's some hazardous constituents in there, and they want to just, what the document says here, it'd probably be prudent for them to manage it as a hazardous waste. Yeah?
In a previous slide, you indicated that you use generator knowledge and reviewing MSDS possibly.
Uh-huh.
So you're assuming if you have an MSDS that has hazardous properties, that you can assume that a hazardous waste and use that out first, or?
An MSDS, a good MSDS can give you enough knowledge usually to show that it's, you can determine if it's hazardous. Determining if it's non-hazardous alone on an MSDS is going to be really difficult just because of all the toxicity requirements in California. They don't usually list oral, dermal, inhalation, aquatic toxicity on all the MSDSs, but there's nothing that says they can't use an MSDS. Process knowledge of here's the materials I'm putting into my process, material spec sheets for metals, or even someone else, another business's analytical that does the same exact process. And that's all in that document that I refer to here. So It doesn't even have to be exactly from your process. If it's the same, someone else's analytical is going to possibly work for you in making that determination. All right, so that was limited. All right, in any case, though, EPA does look for documentation that demonstrates that they sufficiently identified their waste completely accurately. So they have to have something. So here's the conclusion. Although they recognize sampling and analysis are not as economical or convenient as saying I have knowledge of my process, they do provide advantages. It's a critical factor for demonstrating compliance, and misidentification can render you subject to enforcement action. So if they screw up, they're still liable. They're still subject for violations or penalties. Here is another resource. And real quick, if you can get there, just click on table. There it is. Click on the table of contents. This is SW846 Online. There's a PDF, right? Oh, you just, okay, go back a page or close, yeah, back. I'm just going to show you the different chapters. There it is right there. So if you got questions on sampling, if you want to know how do I sample, what are the procedures, what do I need to do, obviously there's a bunch of people that do that for their line of work. If you're trying to figure it out, you can look up all the different SW846 methods for determining hazardous characteristics, sampling plans, groundwater. Within that, it'll tell you what your sample hold times are, how much sample you're going to need, how to do your extraction if you're doing a TCLP, how to run your different tests. So a ton of resources here at SW846 Online. All right. All right, and if you need more info on sampling, again, I forgot to mention the presentation today, and I think that OSWR, it's a 200-page document for waste analysis plans. They're uploaded on the conference website, so if you go to presentations, they should be there listed. And if you click on this class, Advanced Hazardous Waste, there are 3 links that you can reference. You can also go look last year, or even this year, there's again a class on representative sampling. So our previous courses here for advanced had a lot of that info. Now there's one called How to Interpret Lab Results. Whole bunch of great information, conference center. And we're right at the end here. So again, it's either declared, they just decided to manage this hazardous waste. It's characteristic, because it's got one of those D codes. Listed, F, K, P, or U, M. And if you have more questions on any of this, you can catch me after or at the break. Or it's a mixture or a residue derived from hazardous waste. So again, we figured out our point of generation. We're trying to figure out if it's hazardous. The mixture rule, just real quick, a mixture of solid waste and characteristic waste is hazardous only if the resulting mixture exhibits a characteristic. However, keep in mind, if you commingled your waste, you're still got to meet that highest standard. Otherwise, it's considered treatment. So a mixture of solid waste and a listed waste, kind of you hear the term all the time, is normally listed in, listed out, which is what the bottom slide here. Listed in, listed out is only always true for toxic waste. So waste listed for toxicity, because there are 27 or 29 ICR wastes that may no longer exhibit a characteristic. Acetone stills, other types of waste, still bottoms, may not be ignitable anymore. And since F003 is listed for only ignitability, your acetone still bottom may fall out of regulation or not. Treatment residue. Okay, I guess I should have talked about still bottoms under this one. But anyway, the same logic applies that we just talked about, right? So treating, storing, disposing characteristic waste if it exhibits a characteristic. ICR waste are hazardous only if they're still ignitable, corrosive, or reactive. But if it's listed for toxicity, it remains listed. All right.